Hello, Americans. We have black pupils and whites of eyes. To know we have an extent of an ability given to us by nature itself to discern worse than criminal incompetence of the identity, the names of people, the sciences, good people, and we forgive them because we know. When we know too, we know why that was caused by a breaching method. We know this since we are little kids. But with that forgiveness, it was as exploited, and then we have to return to it. And it knew that no one would be able to take subjects, appreciate them, treat it properly, exceptions and exception nature properly. This breaching method replaced what founders communicated to us about black people's whites of eyes, too, what nature communicates to us, about how a breaching method reassigned what nature communicates with black people's whites of eyes as a predicate acts with facts roles method, a method that forced roles with itself. And it forced those roles to sense everyone else's roles too, to an extent. Otherwise, that body would be sensed, and that was and is adapted to. Including that body is a majority of people, including if it is a phenomenon of everyone from the whole country that can only be operated by locations, areas, and states. Fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature note. When did psychiatry stop being criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrong? Readings of principles and of American history. Roles with their databases used to stack criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, or fake transcripts. Pretending things have to be proven that they know are true. And are recorded and made ways to record. They recorded themselves, recording fake things recorded. They had WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News, attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others. These are people involved with untimely deaths that were years apart, and there were time to use /estimate roles. The same thing with body dumping spots. And the same thing with child abusers, leaders of the kid, years apart. There were time use /estimate roles brought up at the same time. And the same names that forced that before it was proven with a principal obscure nature, the same ones involved with the World Trade Center attack at the building, with the names at the building tied to them with all kinds of, he said, she said, but evidence of racketeering worse than war crimes. This breaching method has them involved with all kinds of medicines crimes before the fentanyl problems. No. It had what nature's demonstrations of that force blamed on other things, others themselves. They put whole fake conversations with me, with multiple doctors, one named Gilmore. That was before the World Trade Center attack. Or I don't know if that was after. In other words, I never met the Gilmore. He's reportedly before Christina Sioka became a doctor. I went and she wouldn't let me report predicate acts. See the as a speech therapist, no, as a linguistic, people on a mass scale, they pretend they don't understand others. Then they change and fake what they say, and they self-value roles of predicate acts with facts to get away with it. With predicate acts with facts stuck into databases. There's a former Mayor Gold who was kids and adults recorded him and other mayors and people associated with conversations with them, involved with various natures of federal criminals in other countries before they were caught. There are also timed uses of names next to body dumping spots in the reported killers and murder spots in the reported killers as the same one /S involved with the same house /S intercities with a whole bunch of people that made confessions about different things to make it look like I was peers of them growing up and people associated with them that are my age group that I never was around, tied to my neighbors. They made fake exceptions, in other words, too. These are people on all sides of criminal and civil cases and courts at the same time putting the same sequence shift self-value, the same motivation, syntax, needs, and natures used remotely because there are other things and names involved being screened and being replaced, like the scientific value of the human fact cheating nature breaching method that caused slavery and had it entrenched and had roles with it entrenched. And then America's founders were born. And our founders communicated to us, I read, that we were supposed to refer to them as James Madison singular. And then they went and got George Washington counter-extorted, or he agreed to help them and use their plan. But we know that the laws, they could say, oh, we're not going to agree. We're going to go try to see someone else. No. They had the plan, too, was for George Washington to use that plan to help them. Couldn't do it himself, even with like leftover army members or whatever, as a former general of the English. In northern colonies and southern colonies, it wasn't just England that had slavery entrenched, sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly too, because the difference of that is used also by the breaching method that measures and maintains remote uses of self-valued identities of fact-cheating nature, quality aspects of nature, roles, needs, natures, and styles, sensing, and as sense and sensibilities, use Jane Austen's phrase, used for the breaching method. What motivated roles with slavery was that and how there was a hyper singular torture, extortion, and fact-cheating nature slavery, therefore physical slavery method against everyone. It was the same thing that motivated who they had labeled through interpreters of Jane Austen and all that involved with that. I mean, not Jane Austen, Harriet Beecher Stowe with Uncle Tom, for example. They make subject treatments to measure and maintain at each age of fact-cheating nature. Other things, others, or selves are blamed for things that simultaneously nature and that our founders, plural, who asked us to describe them as James Madison singular, things that they communicated for us to blame on the human fact-cheating nature breaching method, things that they communicated for us to blame how they simultaneously, not only did they not have free speech, everyone, including our founders, they had to pretend other to an extent. Otherwise, that body would be sensed, including if it was a majority of people, and it would be adapted to. And the phenomenon of even if it's a whole country, so every person of every country knows we have black pupils, whites of eyes. But everyone was forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to blame it on other things, others, or self. What locked roles with that at campuses, including interbranch and intelligence tied to them, A through Z. They've never been not hypercriminally foreign influence. They've never been not a certain type of child abuse. Multi-front, while the elderly. So once they get to elderly or middle age, they're multi-front. They're preventing us free speech offensively. How it has gotten away with shows. There is much more hyper-evidentially recorded than anyone could afford to have discerned for the relativity of everyone. In other words, they're just the readings of statutes and precedents regarding the validity or the value of what is said online. Are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. They can't have voice about that. So this is making a certain type of criminal incompetence only capable of being at countries A through Z. Relative to this breaching method, it kept it clearer than day. Other things, others, ourselves, even our founders framed for roles with slavery. Supposed to understand how good they were enslaved. Anyone who tried to counter, it was against the law. The whole thing is that there are a whole bunch of things. They're readings of our own statutes and precedents. We have to address how there's names of the people, the sciences have collusions at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists originally, but then America's founders were born. When did they stop having that in the witch trials and roles with the slavery and the fake law and the courts tied to them? The state of Connecticut corrections officers, names next to it. And the difference of driving it by. Two, there are proofs that they record people driving by. because of how they have people that involved with the intelligence community that say things and they say other. As people at the other end of that too, they're making confessions and putting arrays of falsified police reports, switching arresting officers' names that aren't even there as ones that are simultaneously confessing because they communicate as individuals and group too. They lie as groups too, and then all together. And that's where, and they pretend other, which is also as their confessions while they're pretending other with a whole bunch of other countries, foreign and domestic military involved with Hartford courts in the Britain Superior Court and Connecticut's District Court and/or people tied to them. Involved also with names on all sides of cases that and the courts themselves putting fake things in databases. These are also names that next to the corrections officers know, which deals with prisons and with the judicial branch officers, but also note the uses of the word corrections. See about criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, each age and nature of campus, each age and nature of, we have people that with principles of reason, they have what is variable or constant with subject treatments taken on scales and as systems tactical ulterior from the one that is true always and also positive unto itself. Nature shows us that if anyone had spoken, but not even a lawyer, if the law had been spoken for properly by one person, everyone would understand that slavery was about criminal foreign influences / hyper-criminal foreign influences. And as a hyper-criminal foreign influence, it was as already entrenched at countries A through Z, specifically to keep countries A through Z as the phenomenon that could only be operated at locations, areas, and states, only having been hurt, other things, others ourselves, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to be blamed for things that the breaching method caused and keeps, including, and then defenses of that. So then the counters, and everyone's countering each other properly, but they're using those truths for lies. Right where and how the breaching method needs them to. The breaching method is a scientific value inseparable from any proper treatment of American history as a scientific value inseparable from proper communication by the names of the people of the sciences, let alone American history. But it has been separated. So we could be systems tactical ulterior from its own. That which is also true always and also positive unto itself. But its definition of positive, because it is relative to positive and negative equally. But there is also, it is a quality of diffusion where more and more of itself, that identity of value / value progression, that is not our human species body of individual bodies. It is not the other species bodies of individual bodies, but it is as that one that shows us it is not us nor them, but is all things anyway, and it's generating all group differences, where it is relative to understand the principle of how we have been systems tactical ulterior from its own with differences in the value of our short words, let alone their protraction. They're grouped in simultaneous value. What is individual like a species body, or like an individual of a species body? Or what is grouped like a species body, or like an individual always grouped as an distinct individual species? Know how only humanity is criminally foreign influence, let alone being and having been used remotely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrong. Also with their estimations even to themselves about your own success or non-success is at countries A through Z now relative to and through systems tactical ulterior from that one that each individual in voice knows since you were kids. Other things, others ourselves, were forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded. you know, the significance of this having black people's rights by of the hyper evidential. That's why and how it never got appreciated, never its identity of value progression that we can discern to an extent. We are forbid free speech by that. Our founders left us to demonstrate how they didn't have free speech and how people would get away with and still getting away with pretending things are debatable that are not, while simultaneously pretending things are not debatable, that are not even just not we can prove them true. Right. They are better than just being debatable. On a mass scale, they have subject treatments. They have the natures. People took some subject over industry, economy, a job or not job. You guys left out the breaching methods roles with that. While having been propagated to self-cultivated, self-valued roles, with replacing what our founders left declassified for us to understand about that. Why and how slavery was entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, as the differences racketeering method, worse than war crimes, through other international companies and through other countries, not just England, and through overt criminal enterprises, terrorists at the same time. When did that stop being timed collusion with them and the hyperforeign? There is a record. It is more probable, and it is to an extent discernible that nature itself is showing us we need at countries A through Z. We could charge a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise, even if it's not even a real one. There is a hyper forensic trail of it right through history. There are roles of blaming other things, others ourselves, right where there are demonstrations of it being and haven't been black people. We cannot discern this properly if we stay led by it. We don't leave this out because it won't and doesn't. We could, again, but that's being systems tactical terror from its own, even if everyone agrees. Everyone could agree that the reason slavery was there because of voting. The reason slavery was there because they didn't have means to uproot it in the North or the South. And it wasn't just against black, it was against every single person. It was against black and white instantly, simultaneously. Black and white in exceptions, collusions with the identities of the law. Certain type of victim / hyper victim had no chance to be anything other since some ancient times. Timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists. There are proofs to a hyper archetypal, worse than war crimes. Keeping criminal foreign influences in other countries blamed for what is hyper criminal foreign influences and not A through Z countries. It's not just in America with the suburbs that were built. There are houses that were built before America's founders were even born. Again, tortured, extorted, back-cheating nature, enslaved. The only reason that's got, in other words, all kinds of medicines crimes with the courts and people out of the state judicial branch offices and the corrections offices. All kinds of natures of organized crimes, methods with predicate acts, with facts, and with coverups. They have been using the time to force people between courts or just to time people walking by. And investigators are putting fake records, including fire departments. They're changing and faking transcripts of what goes down. Then they say, oh, well, that's because we're just trying to keep peace. Peace. They have criminal insidious natures of peace at countries A through Z. It's only self-value because that is being used remotely, right, where no one wants it. All exception nature, you should come with demonstrations of the same thing. No one fathomed how it was. And it is involved with all that. It may, and it keeps nature demonstrating to us because it makes and keeps those demonstrations blame the other things, others themselves. And roles with that are simultaneously self-valuing. That having been other things, others and selves, blame for things that James Madison and our founders communicated to us to blame on the human fact shooting nature breaching method. That had even the differences of the guilt, worst roles of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the three branches of government, the intelligence tied to them, the news locations, the names at the intelligence app or next to the news locations, the shipping locations, the mailing locations, military locations, the difference of at or next to, too. At or next to everyone. All natures of conjunction, people out there. That wasn't set up to be exploited. It was as recorded how everyone has self-valued role. With murder methods, when did the three branches of government and the intelligence tied to them stop having roles with murder methods and pretending that people that speak about it make conspiracy theories? There's a Leahy family that put me in fake conversations with themselves, pretended I made conspiracy theories in those fake conversations with themselves. They have judges and prosecutors personally and professionally involved with them through time with identity theft, fraud, slanders, people putting fake things in databases at corners of streets and next to the campuses too. In other words, with the news too. It has something to do with it. The Britain spirit and also whiting forensics is increasingly, since before I was born, through my lifetime, they're increasingly involved with various natures of federal criminals and people involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, first forced, and ones that had roles with their extended family members, and the police and courts forging and switching names that have their kids involved. Also, there are kids of a Leahy family involved with them, putting fake things in databases and abuses of kids between campuses where they don't let the people even know the names of the people they do know the names. They're putting in fake and changed communications with them. All exception nature, they're using their roles with spying, self-value, the way the breaching method knew the hyperforeign knew they would. Because it keeps countries blaming themselves for spying. Russians, American, Ukraine involved intercities on off campuses like Harvard Hospital, with names on off Central Connecticut State University, on off Trinity College. Students and adults in intelligence recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They didn't say the name. Or, some they did years before when they made a fake conversation with me. It wasn't even a statement. It was a confession. People tied to a Ray Colon and his father, Ray Colon. I don't know why he made that look at me the other day, smiling. He shot at me with a pellet gun the day before President Trump was shot at. And there's a Secret Service guy at Central Connecticut State University made a relative confession and demonstration to me and other police forms. There's a Blue Trails gun range involved with people with the name Tomorrow, with wire mail crimes, home break-ins, falsified police reports, people putting predicate acts with facts in databases behind kids' backs in campuses, and putting fake ties, fake natures of ties to people. Increasingly, people from Harvard Hospital and with the businesses and houses next to there, and people just involved with syntax regarding when they were on that street, like Franklin Avenue or Weathersfield Avenue, which, Franklin Avenue goes right by Harvard Hospital's campus, which has the Institute of Living, which is part of the triages where they have a mental health care side of hospitals. Now, through world wars, psychiatry was involved with only a portion of the natures and methods of organized crimes, identity thefts and frauds, relative to where and to how it is recorded how they could even be motivated to pretend they don't realize and to obfuscate what nature communicates with our black pupils, white divides, and within how sciences, words are actually obligated to be appreciated what is actually theory and not. On a mass scale, the breaching method used databases for something that had nothing to do with those roles, with those natures of organized crimes with itself. Everything it did was and is through names A through Z, and does. The breaching method, the hyperforeign, that was not the countries involved, northern colonies and southern colonies with slavery, but had them both roles with it, but also non-distinctly. And we could discern rather than value that and counter that how they all non-distinctly had the same impositions upon themselves and nature's demonstrations of it, where and how the breach method effectively got everyone to blame those demonstrations on other things other than themselves, as they are still doing. People say, oh, George Washington had slaves. You want to have an honest assessment of that. It's supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. And that would have brought up James Madison's plan. So they have roles too, with fentanyl, involved with differences, racketeering worse than war crimes, with interbranch, use their own differences and other people's differences as a certain type of victim / hyper victim, where and how the breaching method showed them how to read the laws and interpret the laws in our founders' communications. Again, they have replaced exactly the way the breaching method wants and needs what our founders communicated about Black people's rights of eyes, what our founders communicated about the human fact nature breaching method that prevented them free speech per the method /S by that had been entrenched, and the /S part as all those roles, needs, natures, and styles of collusion /S against themselves and others. Otherwise, they were sentenced. They were hurt if they weren't syntactically, where and how appreciated. Stand there thinking other than is being spoken for us. At suburbs, little tactically denatured before America's founders were born, let alone the cities, clearer than day, involved with the torture, extortion, fact-cheating nature, slavery method. See, there's things that are not debatable about this. The only reason they're gotten away with being debated. We can't leave out their roles of predicate acts with facts methods into databases. And increasingly people, in other words, if they don't, we have to have to follow the law, mandated law on time, because there are foreign bodies, but there is also a hyper-foreign body involved with how they have all these different countries involved at Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College. Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut. Trinity College is in Hartford, Connecticut. They have roles with intelligence families near me that used to live near me. And one's still here, involved with police departments that have been forging and switching names with them. They attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid and then as an adult. And they keep trying to instigate things because they're trying to cover up what came first. Because the courts try to bring things, a whole bunch of people at the Britain Superior Court have digital crimes with them. And some medical and sexual and legal offenders of kids. And roles where they bring all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the courts putting the fake things at the same time. There are people with the name Scalora involved with people that say their cousins named Demora, who also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with others. They were involved with home break-ins. And his girlfriend was too. Heather Hansen, but also with other people too. And the difference of their roles with that has something to do with their roles with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and Dawn LaConche. They might have taken a picture of me next to her. I was there next to her, but I never had a word of conversation with Dawn LaConche. She has roles with people all along the state, with all natures of conjunctions to the state corrections offices and the state judicial branch offices, like Route 3, all along Route 3. Are people involved with predicate acts and databases, with medical community, with the identity theft, fraud, slanders, lies about themselves and others, a bunch of A Joshua Stryker is also with Trinity College, involved with FBI and foreign and courts at corners of streets on Griswold Street, including with the Witness Protection Program. And former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants involved with this Joshua Stryker. I never seen him in my area, but people associated with the houses involved with wire crimes with the police refusing to identify themselves and putting fake things with the news, and the courts refusing to identify themselves legitimately too. Every time I went there since I was a kid, they've been stacking fake things in databases. They have predicate acts with facts methods they're communicating about and pretending others simultaneously. That's why we need to get them out on paper. Also because they have roles with violence, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, not legitimately with their roles as unmarked intelligence with foreign and domestic, military too. In other words, let's get them on paper, one name and sequence. Let's go. Chop, chop. Please. I forgot who I was titled, and I forgot I was speaking. Miss Bondi. So look at that. They're mixing. These are chemicals things. These are things. These are people who had conversations with my about like placements of classes. People in the background with influences over that, and conversations with my science teachers, distinctly from my English teachers, as people involved too with abuses of the kids and family members of specifically if you address that of leaders of kids and abuses of them. If you try to get involved with that, they lie about their motivations and names and screen the rest of the roles about, not for the legitimate reasons. These are people with Canadian families and Mexican families that have been involved at our campuses in Connecticut with people from a whole bunch of different countries and cultures where that really have the worst roles with overt criminal enterprise and private ones, but also with them being and having been against themselves. Also facilitated per the databases side of the breaching method since before computers. Then further hyper-additionally with collusions hyper-additional that no one wanted, but exceptions are made by the breaching method. It only allows it at campuses where the names of the people, the sciences are manifest. And exceptions like homeschool, because each age of adult and of kids, they're a theater integrity. They'll fake it to make it, but it's fake it to never make it. Because in real life, with the Constitution unabridged, and why and how we have rights that are too numerous to list them, let alone to branch the government, still collusion /S with all natures of crime scenes from their own locations. Speaking about crimes anywhere while their whole predicate acts with facts methods recorded, they can't afford to get on paper legitimately. It would reveal how all sides and natures of difference are and differences grouped too, and something how they are being and have been used by a breaching method, measuring and maintaining all self-valued roles. As systems tactical terror from the one that is a volume science, where how we are a human species identity of volume, a body of volume, a human species body of individual bodies, distinct from other individual species bodies of individual bodies, with all group differences generated by that, which also shows us it's a special difference with that. Valued here, its way, or our value here is forced from here as lethal IDs, not as death, but as, for example, criminal foreign influences of humanity that are taking other species' bodies to extinction. But they had no criminal foreign influences. So they're making more of its identity of relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, but that is further positive unto itself. And so stayed value here, making more of that identity of its relationship to itself as value here. There's also further positive unto itself, its system though, or it is forced from here. But to discern it with its system, we have to discern where it is hyperrelativity to positive and negative simultaneously. Like, for example, any system, any body of it that has entertained the roles with the laws that were forced by the early states and by colonists before it, before American founders were born, it was already entrenched. That's why it stayed with the states too, slavery. No voting about that. The reason they had to vote on that is because it was the breaching method still entrenched, and roles with the breaching method. Otherwise, that body was sensed and it was adapted to. That's what our founders used to force people to break the laws. They have no means to defend themselves, and they still didn't and don't have means to defend themselves syntactically in all kinds of other ways. This has your child abused at campuses A through Z. Forgiveness is to not leave out the breaching method. And we're going to have to secure it. We're going to have to pay attention to where and how there are all kinds of predicate acts of facts, evidences, records, roles with superior court, probate courts, district courts, the Supreme Court. We have black pupils, whites of eyes. These are brilliant people that can be, made proper at countries A through Z at the same time. But not if people are simultaneously pretending things are debatable that are not, and pretending things that are not debatable to be debatable. But to discern who's doing that right or wrong, we have to have the rules followed. Connecticut interbranch refuses to get on paper legitimately since I was a kid. They're torturing, extorting, in fact, human nature enslaving me to say nothing about their rules, stacking predicate acts with facts and databases on and off interbranch locations, intelligence locations, and every campus I went to. Also as the recorded time collusion /S with names next to the campuses. Also with the news to putting temporary people standing there involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them. At the corners next to a principal upskirt nature's campus. They have roles forcing that and other. Has something to do with Paul Kelly and his neighbors. Involved with WTNH, with FBI and inter-police forms of military. All along Route 175 from Old Weathersfield bounding locations and conjunctions to it are people who acted at different times in life. So for other people to film illusions, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. Eric Jensen will record and confess, demonstrate, confirm this with others. Also, Black KKK, Confederate vaccine, Latino and state police families, interstates with the FBI. His co-defendants, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, Thaddeus Grabowski, is involved with on-off Fox Connecticut News. Also with a whole bunch of people tied to it as Dominic Lepriano and his neighbors are ones involved with predicate acts on my street, identity theft and frauds and slanders. Also as co-defendants of roles with Naz, a co-defendant, John LeConte. John LeConte is one of the co-defendants, but also a Dominic Lepriano is involved with Dearborn Street in Newington, Connecticut, with judges and prosecutors involved with drugs and medicines crimes with kids, and their kids involved too. There's a Brian Silver involved with the confessions of New Britain Superior Court, their roles with digital crimes with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, their family members. There's also other prosecutors, retired and standing, and judges, retired and standing, involved with them with on and off the state judicial branch officers, and people all along Two Rod Highway and Hangdog Lane in conjunctions to it. They affected confessions to me, like by Elena Davenport, people with the business office involved with something to do with that, and their roles with Heather Hansen, who has roles with the home break-ins in my area years before that. And I never had a class with her, never saw her around at campus. One quick exception, we had no communication. They made a fake exception so they could change the fake what people remember. They're lying about what people remember. They go back and forth with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the courts at the same time put in the same sequence shift. And collusions with off those locations. Hyper additional collusions, though, and then valuing that having been. And it's relative to where simultaneously are being and having been shown. They need to pretend not to realize such with their roles with keeping the future plans and syntax and nature behind it. Sabotaging and sabotaging roles. Even the sense and sensibilities of the people and defenses of what they know about Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, and what American figures they like, how they would answer questions, etc. You guys have replaced the breaching method right from the communications of our founders, plural, right from the communications of James Madison. You guys have replaced means to interpret Marbury versus Madison while pretending others, so they rely on history experts. History experts, in other words, for example, individually grouped and together. The sciences, names of the people of the sciences are tactical ulterior. Systems, tactical ulterior. From the one that answers all our questions better than perfectly. A 10. So lease of IDs is more probably having been a phrase of the science of pantheism. That is to see through isms, even its own. To stay led by that which is true all the ways, not leaving out the smallest finite details, let alone smallest finite details, group one, simultaneous, / hyper simultaneous. Like, that's what we are discerning. Well, how we are discerning that value / value progression that has all these distinct species bodies as its own value progression system, as a also non-distinct simultaneous to discern that which is / hyper simultaneous, because where its individual body is, the rest of its nature, its complete identity relationship to itself, is also manifest with group parts. Prepare our hearts. Boxing. I just did.